Well, hello and welcome to Author Talk with Richard Lowe. I'm here with Catherine Meyrick from Australia. She's an Australian librarian with the love of history. She has an MA in history and is a family history obsessive. She was born and grew up in country Victoria and has lived all of her adult life in Melbourne. She worked at a variety of jobs over the years before finding her niche in the local public library, including nurse and tax assessor. She also trained as a teacher, but never taught as she lacked the necessary ringmaster skills. She's always loved historical fiction, particularly the sort that uses fictional characters within a well-researched historical background. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Richard.
Again, welcome back and thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you.
All right, and what is your story?
Well, it's historical fiction with strong romance elements. It starts in 1585, and it follows the story of a young woman, a widow, who discovers her father is going to marry her off to an elderly neighbour. She managed to get his permission to have a year to find a husband for herself, and after some sort of false starts, she meets someone she really likes, but he's beyond her reach because it was a very structured society. She doesn't have money, she doesn't have connections. And he's he's married, he's a little bit older. The family is pushing him to marry a well-connected, wealthy woman. And, like with most of these things, other things get in the way. It's set against the backdrop of war in Europe, the Earl of Leicester's army fighting the Spanish in the Netherlands, and also around this time there was Catholic plots to put Mary Queen of Scots on the throne, and those things sort of tie in to what gets in the way of the main character, Bess Staunton, finding, and Edmund Wyard, the young man who's a soldier who has served in Ireland, finding each other.
Well, thank you. Is this your first book?
It's the first one I've published. Yeah,
okay.
I've been writing for years, but this is the one that's first one out there for other people to read.
And did you self-publish it or traditional publish it?
No, I self-published it. I did try the traditional publishing method. The roller coaster of sending out submissions. I had an agent at one stage. She tried all the local publishers. I got as far as the acquisitions meeting at two of the major publishers. All that came out of that was an offer to publish as an ebook, which she didn't think was satisfactory. She seemed to not know what to do from that point. And in the end, we went our own way, and I decided, well, I've got more life behind me than in front of me. Well, I'm sick of waiting around for other people to do it for me. I'll do what my favourite book as a child was The Little Red Hen. So I thought, basically, very well, I will do it myself.
And how did that turn out for you?
I think it was really stressful because, trying to make sure that everything's right, that it looks professional. I paid for the cover to be made by I forgot, Historical Fiction Book Covers, I think it's called. Jenny Q runs it, and I think I have a beautiful cover, and that's been very, very helpful. But I did the rest myself, and probably the most stressful thing was, because I'm in Australia, setting up all the tax stuff for Amazon, and at least with the next one I won't have to do that. It's all set up, and I'm quite happy. I am happy.
Good. Do you have a copy of your book with you?
Well, here it is.
Hold it up so we can see. Good.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's lovely.
Very lovely cover. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so.
Excellent. So what possessed you to write a book?
Well, I've been writing since I was a little girl. When I was at secondary school, one of the teachers had a writing group, and I was invited into that. But as life goes along, a lot of other things get in the way. But I always used to write little bits and pieces, but nothing went anywhere. It wasn't until I stopped paid work and had my children. I started when my daughter was born, when she had her afternoon naps. I started just writing things, mainly short stories and poetry. And about 15 years ago, when they were getting towards the end of primary school, I decided I'd try a novel. And I had a few false starts, but I've just taken a few courses and things like that, and I've just developed it over the years. So I'm a slow writer, and I review and revise and revise and revise. So it takes a long time to get to the point where you've got something you can show other people.
Okay. And did you have fun? Did you have a lot of fun writing the book?
Yes. Yeah, I think I did. I really enjoy the research, and that's part of the problem. You get so bogged down in it. I'd spend a day trying to find the name of the port that that soldiers left Ireland from to go back to England, and then you cut it out because that scene no longer works. So there was a lot of that, and and developing the characters. And I think sometimes the initial writing is not what I find that really painful. The getting it to the point where you've got a story that flows. But what I like is when you really get into the revision and you adding depth to the characters and the background, and you get to a point later in the story and you think I should put that in there, and you go back. It's that sort of building up. I think of it almost like sculpting in clay, and you get and you do things in fine detail, and you think that doesn't work, and you cut a chunk off and then mold it somewhere else. And
that's an excellent analogy. I think of it that way as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And what challenges did you run into writing a book?
I think that it's sometimes not. The further back you go, like we do know a lot about the Elizabethan period, but there are things you don't know, and it's whether whether you can make things up, or if you put this. I'm a bit of a pedant, and I'm always terrified that someone's going to come along and say, "This is rubbish. She got that wrong." But and so that's a hypercritic on my shoulder, and it's that sort of thing. And also one of the things I've tried really hard with is to make the language. I don't want it to be Elizabethan English because that will be very hard for people to read, but I don't want it to sound like people on the street. And going through, and you have a word that is 20th century, or even like a lot of words we use are 20th century American, like hangover. If you want to talk about someone you can't, well, the way I want to write, I couldn't describe someone as saying, "Oh, he had a hangover." You sometimes have to use more words, as in the after effects of yesterday's wine or something like that. It depends on the style of writing. Some people can do it in modern English and it works really well. But for me, I wanted something that was easy to read, but just gave that taste of it not being modern. And I've thrown in the odd word that we no longer use, except I can't remember any at the moment. I found that a real challenge. And that's the thing, each time I'd read through, I'd find something else I'd need to change. And I think in that final period leading up to publication, when you're proofreading, it was this keeping that I kept finding things. How did I miss that? And what do I replace it with?
Yeah, that's the trouble with being a perfectionist as well as an author. You keep going back and writing it until it's perfect. And
then you publish it and someone says, like my daughter read it about 3 months after it was published, and she said, "There's a page there where you call William Thomas." Oh, God. And there are copies out there that, not many, because I didn't sell many initially. So of course I had to pull it all down and put it up again. But I don't know how that slipped through, because it has been read by so many people so many times, and she was the first to pick up on it.
Yeah, I've had the same phenomenon happen to me.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a story about an African slave in 1857 in the U.S., and I'm running into the same thing. The dialect's different, everything's different back then.
Well, the other thing, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just about you can't actually have people talk the way they did, because it would upset so many people. You would have real challenges writing dialogue and things like that.
Indeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been a challenge.
Mm.
It's been a real challenge. Okay, good. So if you had to name one memory about the writing that was the best, the whole thing from beginning to publishing and beyond, what would that be?
Well, it was in the revision stage. I had a scene. I was writing it. It's about May 1586, and Bess meets Edmund again, and they're talking to each other, and suddenly this character walked in, who I hadn't planned. His name's George Rainsford, and I don't know where he came from, but he's larger than life, like a young Brian Blessed, and full of life, bushy beard and things like that. And he became important to the story, but he was not part of the plan at all. And I just think that is the most brilliant thing when you're writing, when something you didn't plan becomes central, and it works so well. And sometimes when you stick really closely to the plan, it doesn't work. But I love George.
Do you find your characters take over your story sometimes?
Yes, yeah, and I think that's partly what happened, and sometimes when something's not working, it's because you're trying to fit it into what you think it should be. You need to listen to what they want to do.
So your characters come alive, so to speak.
Yeah, and they're in my head. And, I sometimes go for a morning walk, and I was walking along, and I'm thinking about what was something, Edmund was thinking and how he would be feeling at this time. And I look around, I thought, where am I? And I walked straight past my street, didn't even notice where I was. And because I was expecting certain things to be there, I was just another block further on. But I thought, am I getting Alzheimer's? No, I'm just a writer with my head in the clouds.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, and why did you choose historical fiction over other genres?
Well, I grew up in a family with a love of history. Both my parents really liked it. They were, of that generation. They didn't go to school past 14, but they continued reading all their lives. Mum loved reading biographies and things like that. Dad read a lot of historical fiction, but Alexander Kent and the more action stuff. And excuse me. With all that, I think just this interest in history just came naturally to me, and that's what I've mainly read all my life. I will read other things, and I think it's important to read broadly. But if a comfort read will be historical fiction,
I understand.
provided it's not too nasty. How some are far too realistic and they don't end well. I like stories that end well.
Yeah, I like reading historical fiction from the Roman era.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want to write a story based in Rome. I think that'd be fun.
And then you could go to Rome to visit the places your stories are set.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I doubt if they're as good as they are up here, though.
No, well, that's always the case, isn't it? It's somehow getting what's in there onto paper and finding the words. And sometimes I think English is almost like a really blunt instrument for doing this, because we need so many words that sometimes I believe there are single words for in other languages. But it's all we've got.
It's what we've got. We work with the tools we have.
Yeah.
How do you promote your book?
Well, Not very well. This is the learning experience. I've tried, I started out with a blog tour. I've done promotion on paid promotion on Facebook, guest, written interviews and guest spots and things like that. And none of it's, because I'm a complete unknown, and I'm not terrific at social media. But I've recently, over the last 6 weeks, I've tried just paid Amazon advertising, and that's working. It's not, admittedly, I'm not making much out of it, but that's not the primary purpose. But a lot more, I've gone from 15 books a month sold to 120. And that, for me, that's good.
It's not bad at all.
No. And I've discovered it's a very niche area, but Amazon's Tudor historical romance, sort of category, I've got as high as number 8 in it, sitting alongside and above some of Philippa Gregory and Ken Follett's. And that's, I feel quite, oh, look where I am, but it drops back. But, for most of the time, I've been in their hundreds since I've started advertising. And what I think of it about, this is long term. I'm working on another book. So this is, as long as I'm not losing money, I'm doing all right. And when the next one comes out, all these people that have read it will want to read my next one, hopefully. Well, 80% of them.
Well, that's the winning strategy, is to build up a fan base.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of advice about make sure you've got one book ready to come out not long after, and write a series. Well, I can't do that. I would be waiting till I was 75 or something to have enough to come out one after the other, and I'll just do it this way and see what happens, because it's not my career. This is something I do that I love outside work. And, it's brilliant. The best thing is when someone says to you, I loved your book, because that's what it's there, to know that you've taken someone out of their ordinary life for, 5 or 6 hours and they enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that. I always love getting those emails from somebody who said, your book changed my life, or something like that.
Yeah. I don't think mine's going to change anyone's life, but it might make them happy.
I understand. So how do you remain productive when you're writing? What do you do about interruptions and things like that?
I have learnt to write anywhere. I used to, at one stage, I had 2 jobs. One at the local public library and one in the local primary school as the librarian. And I used to, just write in my notebook, standing up at tea time or lunchtime. I get a lot of interruptions. A couple of years ago, my husband started working from home, which totally threw, because I used to have the day to myself. It's totally threw things. I do a lot of work at night. After everyone's gone to bed, I don't get anywhere near enough sleep. But, I've learnt to cope with that over the years. I regard it as just an extension of having children. When they're little, you don't get enough sleep. When they're old, you're writing. So, it's just not thinking, I know people have special desks and proper routines. As long as I'm doing, I get in a couple of hours a day, I think I'm doing all right. And then there are days when I do nothing but, I have to get up and make lunch or tea, and they're the only breaks I take. And particularly when you're heading towards a deadline, like publishing, or maybe you've got to get something to the editor in time, then everything else goes, the housework goes. My mother said, don't worry about housework. This is years ago. It'll always be there tomorrow. And that's true. It doesn't run away.
And do you get writer's block? And if you do, what do you do about it?
I generally don't get writer's block because I'm not at it, the whole time. If I find I'm having difficulty writing something, I just write a note about what I want, and then I start writing the bit I want to write, and I'll come back later and And sometimes I just write rubbish, and because I'm just getting something down. It doesn't have to be perfect. There'll be 15 other revisions of it, and I'll get there in the end. That's just the way I look at it. It's just, it'll work out. I think it's when you start stressing over it that it becomes a big thing.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I do writing for a living, so I can't afford writer's block, and I have to write. I have to write at a high pace, like 10,000 words a day sometimes. So that's I understand.
Yeah.
You just writer's block. What's that?
Yeah. It's well, it's almost like a luxury.
Yeah. I mean, if you were in a job and you got job block, would you stop? I mean, what would your boss say?
Yes, I can imagine that. Yeah.
I don't feel like working today, boss. Sorry.
Oh, yes, we have a few of them. People have started to take what we call sickies here, sick days. Mental health days is the day where you just don't want to go to work. But I've never had them.
You can't get away with a lot of those.
No.
All right. What is your favorite thing about being an author?
I think what I mentioned earlier, people telling me they've enjoyed what I've written. And I think there's immense satisfaction to say, look at something like when you've got a physical book there, to think, I did all that, that somehow out of my head, I ended up with something physical that people can look at and read, and it will take them somewhere else. I think looking at the book and having people tell me they loved it. I had one woman say her review started or ended with, you have to go out now and buy this book for yourself and for every person in your sphere of influence. And I thought, you're wonderful.
Indeed.
But she enjoyed it.
So you've published it in paperback and on the Kindle?
Yes, yeah. I was originally intending only to do an ebook because I thought that was all I was capable of. But then just looking around and going on forums and seeing what other people said, and it just didn't seem that difficult to make that extra step. And, of course, the ebooks sell a lot more, but I sell a lot more ebooks, but there's a steady number of people buying the paperback. It's not. I haven't tried publishing it into selling it into physical bookshops. It's very difficult, and I haven't quite had the time. I am aiming though to get it into as many local libraries as I can. We have this brilliant thing here called public lending right. So if you've got your book in about 50 libraries, the government will actually pay you a small, it's equivalent of a single ebook royalty on all the books that are in your in libraries. And I think that's great. So it's already in about 6. So we're going off on holidays, and when I come back, I'm going to start working on that.
Have you thought about putting it in an audiobook format?
Not yet.
Okay.
I've thought about it, but it's a bit much to one step at a time.
I understand.
I did think too about large print, but then because I know I'm sure a lot of, like working in a library, I'm sure it's something a lot of older people, older ladies would like, but a lot of them like the large print format, but that will require a bit of reformatting, and it'll need a different sized cover. And at present, I've been working really hard on revising my next book, so that's just fallen by the wayside at the moment.
Okay. Do you have any tips for our viewers about writing?
Well, I think the starting point is read. Just read everything. Read classics. Read rubbish. Read in your favourite genre, read outside it, read the latest things, and then once and keep reading. It just astounds me, people who don't read much. People who work with words who really don't read, because you find things, you see the way people do things. you learn so much about writing from reading. But it's also important to take a few courses. You don't have to, get a Masters of Creative Writing, but most of those are run by people with some experience. If you go to legitimate places, our Council of Adult Education runs courses, and that's where I did my initial ones. Courses on publishing, I did those through the Romance Writers of Australia. They have these online courses, and that's where I got the confidence to actually go ahead and publish as an ebook. I found more about publishing as a paperback from forums and things like that. And I think also it's good you need a good editor too. And sometimes you get beta readers, but I think people will say things about it that you don't like. They'll give you advice, like cut that first scene, it doesn't do anything. That was something that was said to me about Forsaking All Other. Nothing happens. And I was arguing to myself, well, it's no different from the first scene in Gone with the Wind. Nothing happens in that. They just sit around talking. When several people say, there's a problem, and so I cut it, and it's much better for it. You don't have to do it as soon as you're given the advice, but always think about advice, about criticism when 2 or 3 people say it, there's something there.
Okay. Well, it's been fun talking to you. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, I'd just like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and anyone that listens to this that's bought my book, I'd like to thank you for buying it, and I hope you really enjoyed it.
It's been fun. I enjoyed doing these interviews, meeting other authors and things.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for coming to the show, and for all the viewers out there, this is a twice weekly interview. So if you want to subscribe, hit the button down below, and you can subscribe to this video. Thank you for watching.